Welcome to the Creative Spaces Podcast. This is Rob Wenner and Kevin Booth, and we're talking to successful people about their careers, how they got started, and their surrounding environments that influence their creative process.
In today's episode, we are honored to be talking to the amazing session guitarist and educator, Tim Pierce. Tim has played on a staggering number of recordings for artists such as Phil Collins, Crowded House, the Goo Goo Dolls, Bob Dylan, Lana Del Rey, and many, many more. Tim has a unique and inspiring setup in his studio. It's a gear lover's dream. Tim also has a very popular YouTube channel where he shares every aspect of his professional life, including lots of guitar tips, instructions, tons of great gear info, and a variety of distinguished guests. If you want to play and laugh and learn about all things guitar from a real-world, first-call industry professional, check out his YouTube channel.
Hey guys,
your channel is really engaging.
Thank you.
As a guitarist, I find it really inspiring, and there's a lot of really great content out there. But the way it's delivered in a practical manner, and the insights you have for recording as a session guitarist, but just guitars in general, and simplify things. You know, watch it all the time. My wife watches it with me, and she enjoys it as well.
That's good news. Wives and
it is.
Yeah.
That's
good news.
So it's technical, yes, but there's a positive energy all the time, and you make guitar playing fun.
Thank you.
And you make talking and educating about guitar playing fun.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's really great. So how did you originally get your start? You're originally from Albuquerque, New Mexico, and what drew you to the career path in Los Angeles and where you are now?
That's an easy one, and I'll try and condense it. So I was born in 1958, and my love of music comes from Top 40 radio in the 60s. You guys might identify with that depending on how old I don't know how old you guys are, but so really at age 3, probably in 1961, I started hearing the radio. My sisters were playing the radio, and then by age 5, the radio was omnipresent. So I was listening to all the great music on Top 40 radio from basically the age of 5, and I fell in love with it, and songs would literally transport me. There was nothing more magical than a song, and it was everybody's songs.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't just rock. It was any kind of pop. You know, there was such a diverse collection of different styles of music.
Yeah.
You know, it wasn't segmented like it is now.
Yeah.
There was just all different styles, you know, rock, R&B, folk, novelty songs, there's so much different stuff, pseudo-classical stuff on Top 40 radio, that you heard a little bit of everything. And as that got better and better, and then FM showed up, and then the really cool rock bands showed up. I mean, the Beatles showed up. That changed my life. And then in the late 60s, all the guitar heroes showed up, but all the guitar players that I loved worked in the context of songs. So what I want to stress to you is, more than guitar playing, my love of music comes from songs. I always liked the way guitar functioned inside songs. And that would include our guitar heroes, because even in Led Zeppelin or Hendrix or, ZZ Top or Cream, there was always a song that was bigger than the actual guitar performance. And I still feel that way. And these days that's harder to find. But we can talk about that later. It's nobody's fault in particular. It's just the way things have turned out. But the real reason that I started playing guitar was because I loved songs, and I loved the way guitar functioned in songs. Lastly, at the age of 20, I was able to move out here with a little help from my mom. She gave me her old car, and I was able to move out to LA and actually start working pretty quickly. So it was the end of 79, drove out here. It's 810 miles. It was not very expensive to rent a room in LA in 1980. So, and there was lots of gigs. And there was a certain point when I realized I could keep my bank account at $700 and start buying gear. And I realized I was getting by. So, my rent, I shared a rental home with 2 other gentlemen, and my nut on the house was $233 a month. And so it was just easy, it was an easier time. And LA was, if I look back now, LA was actually welcoming to musicians. You came here and it was a huge scene, but there was so much going on. It was like, hey, join us on this rehearsal. Hey, here's $30 for a rehearsal. Here, hey, here's $50 for a gig. It was this huge campus of music getting done by musicians. And it was intimidating because frankly, everybody was better than I was. When you don't live in one of the
Right.
centers of music, you
Yeah.
get a little bit of an ego about how good you are. And then when you come to LA or
Yep.
Nashville, or back then it would have been New York, you realize, oh, I'm there's so many people doing
Yeah.
this better than me. I was
Yeah.
wrong. I
Yeah.
was
Your
not
big
that
fish,
good.
small pond. Yeah. Big fish, small pond, small
Yeah.
fish, big pond.
So
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Yeah.
a synopsis of
Cool.
how I ended up here in LA.
Yeah. And that imagination when you're young, don't we have like an untapped or newly tapped and no governors on it in our imagination when we're young? You can just picture yourself doing that. As long as you can maintain that in your life, the better you are, right?
It's true, and it's funny. At this point in life, I'm kind of reclaiming it. It's funny. Yeah,
Very true.
it's funny because I worked for 40 years under a lot of pressure doing sessions, and that was my only focus, is to get the job done for the people who were expecting me to get the job done. And
Yeah.
now I'm actually kind of trying to be a teenager a little bit and just rediscover the joy
Yeah.
of guitar. So
Absolutely.
it's good.
Awesome.
Yeah. Did you ever at any moment have another plan, a backup plan, anything that you were going to do? Or was it just, I'm going to play guitar?
I
And
didn't,
that's my
because I
plan?
had a sense that one way or another I could get by, either teaching guitar or playing guitar. And as by the time I had moved here, I just turned 21, and within a few months, I was already starting to make a living. And within a couple of years, I started to do some pretty great gigs. So I didn't really have to. For me, Plan B was always going to be teaching. And I did a little teaching when I was in my late teens and a little more teaching in my late 20s. And then now it's become a big business for me. So which I didn't expect, but it's the Plan B becomes Plan A. But I think a lot of people's lives are like that. And for a lot of people, session work would have been Plan B for a lot of people. Sometimes you would get called a journeyman, if you were a side musician or a session man. Guitar magazines in particular only focused on the guys that were, guitar artists,
Right.
and so that to a lot of people was Plan B, but for me, it was Plan A. I actually admired all of the session guitar players so much and the session musicians because of my love of records, that for me, session work was a Plan A. It took me about a decade to get good enough at it. I didn't really start working full time until I was 30. So it took me about a decade to get good enough at it to be a reliable call in every aspect.
Yeah.
But Plan B, Plan A, Plan,
Yeah. Yeah.
Plan B
It's
was
the
teaching.
plan.
Yeah.
So, and at some point, this may not be your big break or where you got started, but at some point you land with Rick Springfield at Sound City Studios, correct?
Well, that was actually my first big touring gig and my first, he's a good guy. We're still friends. In fact, I'm going to see him on Saturday. But I got that gig when I was 23, and it was like, oh, I'm going to have a steady income. We're going to tour the world, and it appears that I'm going to be playing on his records. And that lasted for 4 or 5 years, from about 1983 to 1987 or 1988. And that was a wonderful thing because it allowed me to kind of, it's the kind of thing I could tell my parents, oh, look, I'm making a living at this. We're actually doing big gigs. Then I always got to play on the records, which was really rewarding. And it's not always a given when you're in a live touring band.
Yeah. At that time, particularly, right?
Yeah.
Because he had management and the whole deal, and management made those decisions. Possibly, I don't know.
No. It's up to. It was always up to the artist and the producer who they would have in the studio to make the record.
Yeah. Is there any one particular guitarist that you admired or kind of modeled after during that period of time or any time, or is it just you're sponging from all over?
Yeah, it's the whole collection of them. I mean, just like many of us, Hendrix was probably the person that really lit me on fire more than anybody. When I heard "Are You Experienced" and saw him and watched him and listened to him, he probably had the strongest effect, but it was everybody else too. And indeed, I mean, minor, you know, major, minor guitar, influences, all of them. I would really didn't matter. If I heard a guitar solo on a record, I found out who the guitar player was, and I loved that guitar player, no matter who it was. Yeah, so pretty broad based, but Hendrix at the top of the pyramid.
Well, where'd you see Hendrix play? Excuse me.
Never got to. My mom wouldn't let me go
Oh,
see
yeah.
him. So.
Okay.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
and I became familiar with you through Toy Matinee, and
Right.
I'm a couple of years older than you, but I grew up reading liner notes and reading all the people that were on that. I didn't usually buy a record based on the artist. It was more about who was playing on it from a studio musician standpoint. So, yeah.
Me too.
And
Yeah.
so I became familiar with the body of your work through that, and just say, okay, cool. I love that. I love that record, and Tim's playing on that.
Yeah.
And so that's,
Yeah.
that's how I became familiar with you.
Well, and you learn a bunch of that from the channel just watching it, because you go over certain stuff that you've done in the past or current, even down to the pit at the Grammys, all that stuff. It's just
right.
amazing.
Thank you. Thank you.
One you just recently posted 4 days ago was just how to do guitar on some of the pop R&B stuff that's out now. Very interesting, and stuff that other guys don't teach, like kind of where to be minimal and be a part of the band or the ensemble, as you say, and that chord can be 2 notes. It doesn't have to be the full bug. When I was younger, we thought, well, we had to hit the whole chord, man. Be as loud as you can. And the other guitar player doing the same. So it's great. That's great stuff to learn aside, as well as, what note and what scale and all those things, what mode. That's really valuable stuff too.
Thank you. I mean, it might not be the biggest audience in the world, but it is where I need to focus, because there's so many other voices out there. And in this world, you need to actually kind of do what you're meant to do and what you're best at. And it's the only thing I know. I know how to play guitar in songs. So I'll keep doing that, in addition to other things too. A big part of the guitar audience wants to learn more than that, or learn, licks basically. But I'm glad that you appreciate that, and that is that's where I'll keep my niche.
Yeah, it's valuable. I think someone writing their own songs or in a band has learned a lot about that, a lot from that. Yeah. You've had the opportunity to work in a lot of different studios over the years through your session work, and you have your own studio as well. So what has changed over the last couple of years for you?
Well, if you want to talk about the last couple of years, that's I mean, we're talking about the pandemic, basically.
Yeah, we're talking about pandemic changes. Yeah. Are you predominantly at home now, or?
Well, the real thing about the pandemic for me is because I started my online business really about 12 years ago, and I monetized it about 7 years ago, which is now just the subscription, site. And just coincidentally, we built a brand new version of it. Spent 4 months building a new version of it on a new platform. And it was pure coincidence, but we debuted it the first week of the lockdown.
Oh, wow.
And so I had a better product, a better thing to provide people, coincidentally, that I just made, that we had just made. I have a lot of help, but and what happened at the beginning of the pandemic was the website, the subscription business, really took off, and so I was able to focus my days on, I was fully engaged and employed in this education site.
Yeah.
I was very lucky. And that has continued. So these days, session work for me is a choice. I really only do it when I want to do it and for people I want to do it with. And there's really I don't have any financial needs from session work anymore. So because the business is so good, and I have 4 employees, 1 full-time employee, full-time film editor, and 3 part-time employees in the web, on the web, on the subscription site. So that's my focus now, and I actually get to play more guitar, just because of the YouTube performances and all that. So session work for me now is just basically family and friends. Now, if you want to talk about the career that preceded that and how it changed, well, of course, more of us started working at home, and I still do sessions at home. But it's not, I was never the guy that really enjoyed working alone and delivering files. I always forced people to come over because I want them to be responsible for the decisions. If I have 4 options, I want them to show me the option they want to use within, 15 seconds so that we get it done. You can just spend so much time. If you're a musician who delivers files, you're actually producing, you're doing more than your job. And there's just so much about it that doesn't work for me that I always insisted that people, come here rather than delivering files. So that's one thing where I was different than some of the other guys. But this, as we all know, the studio thing changed, and there are local studios that are still doing okay, and a lot of them have patrons, or in the case of Sunset Sound, they're fully amortized, so they have no expenses. But that real estate, Sunset Sound is my favorite studio.
Yeah.
And that real estate is so valuable that the family will not be able to resist selling it at some point. But
Wow.
The local studios that are still, up and running, they have some of them have patronage. Like Henson has the Jim Henson Company, kind of protecting it. And then East West has East West protecting it. And then there are other patrons at other studios who keep them open and running. But, the studio business is, they get sporadic work,
Yeah.
So I'm sure in Nashville it's better,
Right.
But out here it's still going, but it's just so much easier for me to ask somebody to come here just because all the gear's sitting around.
Exactly. I saw in an interview too that you mentioned that you react to the person's facial expressions too, or their reaction, their immediate reaction, and that helps you, that guides you to where to go with everything. That's an awesome way to do that, because
and you
rather than burying yourself.
You have an incredible setup and studio rig around you. You're surrounded by gear on camera. So that's half the watch for me, is to see what has changed. What amps are there now? What pre's are, what compressor has LEDs on it now? So I have one question though. Do you levitate into that space or rise up through the floor?
No, the thing is, it's people ask that a lot, but I just drop. Let me get this turn. So there's a small
the mystery
space that I can walk into that somehow people can't see when on the camera. So it is kind of funny. I get that question.
Off to one side, it kind of looks like you might have been able to make it between the table and the amps, but not really. So
just wide enough for me to walk in, and believe me, all my guitars have dings on them. It's
the third option would be just kind of like beamed in, like Star Trek or something, or particles. Some sci-fi entrance. Be great.
That's what a real cockpit in a plane. You'd have to kind of drop in from the top.
Exactly.
Well, a fighter plane, definitely.
Right.
So of that gear and your signal chain, there's Neves, BAEs, promoted those a little bit. EL8, I see lit up a lot through an Apogee Symphony maybe. So what is your kind of favorite go-to channel for guitar, or does that change frequently?
Well, one thing I have to tell you is that the EL8 is bypassed 100% of the time.
Is it really?
I only use that for acoustic guitar.
Okay.
So it's never on, and a lot of people think it's on all the time. So I apologize for that.
Is it in an opto then for acoustic guitar?
What's that?
In an opto setting for acoustic guitar? Kind of like real slow attack.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, exactly.
Quick release.
So it's pretty simple, even though it doesn't look like it. So I go into an amplifier. The amplifier goes down into the garage in my vault where I have 412 set up. there are microphones in front of those cabinets. They come back up into these BAE mic pre's. Those go into a mixer, and I just retired my Chandler mixer, and I'm using this Kahayan mixer, which is really much simpler, and it kind of saved me because the Chandler started to malfunction after a decade, and so I retired it actually a few weeks ago, and then now I'm just going through this mixer, so they all sum together. So all the mic pre's, I can blend microphones through mic pre's, and then they sum into a mono track. So
Into a mono track.
it's kind of a neat setup now. Each, like these two microphones are on one 412. These two microphones are on another 412. These two microphones are on another 412, and these two microphones are on another 412. So I blend two mics on each of 4 different 412s right now with different vintage Celestians in them. So it goes amp, cabinet, microphone, mic pre, mixer, where they sum together, out of the mixer into the Apogee, and then out of the Apogee into Pro Tools.
Awesome.
And in microphones, is that a dynamic and a condenser combined? Or?
Yeah, it's a Royer 122V and a 57 on 2 cabinets, and then I was fortunate enough to get a couple of C800 Sonys, which are blended with 57s on the other 2 cabinets. They're not the C800G; it's called a C800. It has no heat sink, and they're impossible to get. It was a mic that was not popular. They didn't make a lot of them, but it's known as the modern C37, basically.
Okay.
So you literally cannot find this mic anywhere.
Yeah, awesome. I didn't know about it. I didn't know they made one without a heat sink on it. It's interesting. And then you have 2 Pro Tools rigs. So I or your guest or client could walk in there and sit across from you, basically, and face you.
Yeah, and it's been the greatest thing, because I spent my entire life kind of looking at people's sides and backs in control rooms. And when I designed this, I thought, wouldn't it be great if I could just look straight at people? And it's been the greatest thing, because you can the communication is instant. And when you are constantly shaving off 5, 10, 15, 30 seconds off of every decision and every interaction, you end up getting 3 hours of work done in 1 hour.
Yeah. It's fantastic. It's a great thing to see, thinking differently about the studio, and not in a traditional way, but in a functional way that still sounds good. I mean, I assume that your position in that room is also optimized or optimal in terms of reference, what you're hearing.
Well, it's optimized for me to see out the windows, basically.
Which is
it was optimized for 2 things: for me to see out the windows, and for people to bring their crazy family and friends and sit on couches, basically. So I kind of like you, because you guys have spent your lives in studios. I wanted this to be kind of the anti-studio, and so in that sense, it's just a comfortable room with couches, a big area for people to sit and relax and even stretch out on couches, and then the work area, and then I look out at kind of empty. I look out at. It's hard to describe. It's trees. I look at trees and mountains, basically. So
cool.
Well, that's great.
It's a nice, which I didn't expect when we bought the house. I didn't expect. Oh, I actually get to look at this nice kind of pastoral setting.
Very good.
We're a little bit out of the city.
Yeah, aligns with the topic of conversation we recently had with a well-known mixer who has windows, and we just, traditionally you wouldn't have windows, the geometry of the room and acoustic treatment, that kind of thing. But so many people choose to know what time of day it is, kind of, so they're not disoriented maybe when they're done working and find out, oh, now it's nighttime. There's a jet lag kind of feeling that comes from that.
It's just nice. I mean, we've spent our lives in caves, basically, and I just wanted to kind of flip that. And the studios that I love the most are studios that had quick access to the outdoors or windows, and that was just because of the way you feel when you're seeing sunlight.
Right.
Yeah. Right. What's the ambient sound of the room where the amps are, or is there any acoustic treatment?
It's not a good space. No small space for cabinets is optimal. It's about the size of a big truck. It's big. You can walk into it, but it's very dead in there. but the cabinets are so loud that you get this, you get pollution coming back. Like even a 57 will hear everything coming back to it from the room, you know? And so what what happens is it feels and sounds like you're getting a lot of really nice bottom end, but it's really just
reflection,
kind of a pollution that comes back. So the way I solved it was by hanging 2 curtain walls. So the 412 is blasting at full volume through the microphones, and then the sound goes through one curtain that's hanging, and then through another curtain that's hanging, and then when it comes back, it's very much diminished.
Right.
So the wave that's coming back and polluting the microphones has been very greatly diminished by these curtains hanging, and that helps a lot. Still not the greatest environment. The greatest environment is the large room where nothing comes back. Goes up.
Right.
So, because, you know, it blew my mind that even a 57 tight against the speaker is going to get polluted by sound coming back
by reflection.
And you think, oh, that sounds great, it's fat and warm, but it's really not that. It's actually stealing definition from the top end and the mid range. I mean, I've dealt with it and I've gotten it better and it's good now, but it's, you know, I got to be honest, it's a great space, but it's not the best sounding space.
Well, that's interesting to talk about too, is the frequency that's coming back. That's why that sounds louder. That's why it's more prominent, because of the reflection.
I mean, at first you go, oh, this great bottom end, I'm getting a fat sound, and you realize, oh wait, it's just kind of cloudy.
Right.
So
Right.
Well, you're doing well with it.
I've figured out how to now it's been pretty much mitigated with those curtains. Works really well. Really well. I mean, they can't be the curtains have to be thin enough that the sound can pass through them and then come back. You know all this. You guys are scientists about this.
Well, there's a transparency there in what frequencies will pass through. And we put stuff into a box, fabrics and stuff into a box, and test their transparency with a speaker and a microphone, what frequencies pass through.
Right.
Even your best kind of acoustic fabric has like a 1 dB attenuation, depending on the frequency range. Some that are acceptable, we've looked at, to 3 dB, but at some point, you have to cut that off. You either want it to be transparent or not, and what frequencies pass through.
Well, what you guys do is so helpful to people, because most people are building rooms that, where the walls are parallel and they have big problems to solve.
Yeah.
And you guys solve those problems. And it's so important for people to hear properly.
Right.
Right. Luckily, this room is big enough. It has it's carpeted and big enough to where I don't have a lot of monitoring problems. But the focus of this room is not accuracy; it's workflow.
Yeah.
So,
Right.
Right. And I noticed you're using a smaller pair of Genelecs as your reference monitor for your position.
The great thing is I get to drop a name now. Jack Joseph Puig was over here. I would have all the heavies over here. He was over here recording guitars, and he suggested, dude, you need to get some pinpoint speakers, because he's hearing the pollution from my monitors, because there's a set of monitors facing me and a set facing the producer. And of course, Jack is like, oh, this is how to fix this. So he suggested those little Genelecs, and he was right. They worked great for a long time, but after I switched to more the online thing, I took my wonderful Adam S3As, which are the client speakers. I pointed them towards me, because now it's more important for me to. Now I want the best, So,
right.
So the Genelecs have been moved out, and then I have some Dyne Audios that are okay client speakers, some big Dyne Audios.
Yeah,
cool.
Because it's less about the client now than more about me enjoying making videos.
Yeah.
So I got these old S3As that I bought used, and they're marvelous.
Awesome.
That's an interesting topic too, is that pollution you're talking about, speaker boundary interference. So a speaker emulates or transmits vibration from all around the cabinet, and that can occur at the back of the cabinet as well, which hits the wall and reflects to
and it's not good. That's the reason nobody has copied my rig, is because Talk about pollution. The actual client sitting in front of their speakers is getting a lot of just like undefined, cloudy bottom end from my speakers. So the Genelecs were great for that because they were so small and
Right.
they didn't pollute the client's speaker realm.
Yeah.
Right.
But everybody deals with it.
Yeah.
They just turn up their speed. It's not that bad of a thing. People go, oh, yeah, they get it. It's like it's worth it for being able to sit here and do this in this
Yeah.
crazy way.
Right.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
So tell us about the masterclass. So we've talked about the YouTube channel, we've subscribers on your channel and watch your channel, but tell us about the masterclass. What is?
Well, what it is I wanted a way to transition out of a session career that was going to diminish no matter what. So even in the best of eras and the best of times, if you do session work for 40 years, which I have, it's at a certain point, they're just going to want the younger version of you. So, about 12 years ago at age 50, I discovered a couple of guys in social media who were doing 7-figure businesses. One in particular, a guy named Marty Schwartz with his partner, with guitar education. And it wasn't teaching. They weren't there in person. They were actually just selling video content. And then we discovered, Greg Bissonette and I discovered, he discovered the drum version of that and told me about him, which is Mike's Lessons. And and then I discovered some other people, and there's a big bass guy too named Scott Devine. He's in the UK. At any rate, I realized, okay, if I can just actually do a small percentage of this, I'll be fine for, the next, subsequent chapters of my life. Because it's frustrating when I was in an industry it was really, really an amazing place to make a living. And that, the actual numbers got lower and lower. And to be quite honest, a guitar player now works twice as hard for half the money that I used to get, or twice as hard for a quarter of the money that I used to get. So it was like, rather than stay in that declining environment, and which would have declined even in the best of times because of age,
Right.
So it's not, there are lots of reasons why you would want to do something else after 4 decades. I decided to do this. So I worked a double shift from age 50 to age 60. I worked a double shift doing sessions and the masterclass. And now I've been able to transition into just selling this video product. Now, the main thing about this that's excellent for me at this point, it's a product rather than a service. So it earns money without me. I am not there when the money is earned. Right. I have to work on the promotion, which is the YouTube channel, and I have to work, adding videos to the masterclass, but I do that at my leisure, basically. I work hard, I work, but I also, I'm not serving clients anymore. So it's a product rather than a service. So it's like I'm selling a bottle of ketchup that sits on a shelf. I'm not there to earn the money. That's the very best thing about it. So it's a collection of videos. Right now it's up to 1,700 videos and 140 hours. I'm building a beginner course it didn't exist in December, and now it's up to almost 100 videos, and I add videos to that every day. I have a beginner's course now that is large and getting larger.
Yeah,
cool.
So it's a video collection that people buy, and they either pay by the year or by the month. And the YouTube channel is in service of getting the eyeballs and getting just that handful of people that want to take a shot at learning guitar.
It's fantastic.
Awesome.
Yeah.
I think I need to start the beginner classes then, because I learned 7.5 chords on the guitar. I'm not a guitar player, I'm a drummer, so I apologize for that. But
holding all drummer jokes back.
I'm fascinated. I have a lot of friends that are guitar players, and I've always been fascinated about the guitar, and I just never was able to do it. And but someone like you is very inspiring, even from my point of view, is that would kick me in the butt to sit down and figure stuff out.
Well, it's interesting because most of the guitar players who are guitar artists these days play circles around me in their ability to, execute.
Yeah,
But
that's
but here's the thing is that I think most of us, there's the rest of us.
Mm-hmm.
Basically,
Yeah.
there's them and there's the rest of us. And the thing about guitar is that you don't have to be great at it to make a good sound. And I'll give you an example. I mean, if you're playing the violin, it's pretty rough if you're new at it. But if you're playing an electric guitar and you're rough around the edges, you kind of sound like Keith Richards, So it's a very forgiving place to be
that's an
to be rough around the edges.
You can find your niche no matter how good you are. Yeah, if you're a beginner or if you're
I mean, it's just such an amazing sounding thing, and a lot of those limitations can become part of your style. So it's really after a couple of years on the guitar, you can actually be making nice sounds. And I wouldn't say that's true about the violin or the piano or the cello.
Yeah, that's very true. That's very true.
There's different styles of guitar playing that are just really raw and kind of aggressive, and sometimes those are not real accomplished players, but they are just putting their feeling and emotion into it. And that's, I remember a story about Kim Thale, Soundgarden, and his solos and his vibrato, and a question about his vibrato, and he said, "Well, that's really because I'm nervous. His hands are shaking, and he's nervous, So that's how he got his unique vibrato." But that's, it's just putting yourself into it.
That's great.
Everyone should, guitar player or not, should watch the channel or subscribe to the classes.
Yeah.
I think you make guitar playing fun. It's enjoyable. It's enjoyable to watch or play along.
That's what I'm going to try and do. I want people to feel good sitting there, because who has time? None of us have enough time to actually dedicate. Very few of us have time to dedicate our lives to it, and so we do it when we can. And I like for it to be fun.
I sometimes watch and forget to learn something and play because I'm just having fun watching the channel. It's like, oh yeah, let me stop it and go back and do it.
Stay on track. Stay on track.
Another question about guitars and types. So, I had always been a Gibson player kind of myself, but had Strat guitars. And we always had those conversations about you can put a humbucker in a Strat guitar. It still sounds like a Strat guitar. And, I'm not building guitars, but I'm assembling guitars, playing around, putting different woods together, like a mahogany neck on a ash strap body that you can't buy anywhere with humbuckers, and discovering that has its own sound too, and that maybe the difference isn't so much about pickups, but scale length. I wonder what you thought about that.
Well, there are a lot of differences. I mean, this is a great subject, and I'll try and keep it as brief as possible. I more play Gibson and PRS scale guitars now. They seem to fit my hand. They seem to fit my hands better.
Smoother or more buttery, or maybe.
It's a lot of things. Yeah, I would say that. I would say that, and certainly having a thicker tone serves me better than having a thinner tone. And I would say that Tellys and Strats, they just start with a thinner tone, and so you massage it and you grow it from there. But the neck shape on a Gibson or a PRS works better for my hand, and the scale length works better for my hands. That being said, I played a Tom Anderson at a music store the other day that was just marvelous. It played just a dream. And I have some Strats that are boutique Strats that have compound radius necks that work really well for me too.
For a Tom Anderson guitar, that's hard to find, right? There's not a lot of those around.
Oh no, well, they are hard to find in that every single one of them is sold. Just like everybody else, the pandemic made he's just sold out all the time. You can't make enough guitars.
Wow.
But Chris Buck, who's a great guitar player, who everybody should check out on YouTube, brought up in a YouTube video recently the fact that if you do play a Strat, you're more likely to sound more like one of your heroes and less like yourself. So that if you play the Strat with the neck pickup, you're going to sound like Hendrix or Stevie Ray Vaughan. So that's one aspect of it. It doesn't have to be
Mm-hmm.
that way. There are a lot of reasons why I gravitate more towards, a Gibson style, humbucker style guitar. And I really could talk about it
Yeah,
for
it's
a
a fun
long
topic.
time.
Like
But it's everything. It's scale length. Frankly, it comes down to noise too. I mean, I have noiseless pickups in some of my Strats, but a lot of Strat necks don't fit my hands as well.
yeah.
Anyway, the vintage style Strat neck that everybody loves, it's too small and round for me. Like Mark Lettieri has a PRS signature model that's done really well for him. It's an amazing guitar, but the neck was just too vintage style, small, rounded. It's please, if you have any specific questions, please ask, because I'll just ramble on this. It's a big.
Sure. So let's talk about wraparound tailpieces. So I have an old 71 Gibson with a wraparound tailpiece, a Les Paul, played it for years. It's a member of the family. It's got a sound. It's got a thing. I've had 4 different sets of pickups in it. It never sounds any different, really. And I've played other Les Pauls, and they just that. So what is it about a wraparound tailpiece?
You're talking about the one-piece bridge.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, on a Les Paul, a one-piece bridge just lights me up. I just love it so much. And they are all the PRSs that Paul sends to me, and that I bought a couple too.
Wraparounds,
They all seem to have the one-piece wraparound bridge. There is a response, and all I can say is it goes like this. It's like a tube, like what a tube does. There's a springiness that the one-piece bridge provides that I feel and I hear. So I love it. I truly love it.
Yeah, I thought you did, because I see you play that one a lot, or different PRSs with that tailpiece.
Yeah, I gravitate. Paul's the same way. Paul Reed Smith and I are friends, and that's his favorite thing too, is the one piece. It's just there's a response and a tone that's just springs out. It's like blooms, all those words that are overused, but
right. And sustain, I think.
Yeah.
I think it has
better sustain. It could be. Yeah.
Or more consistent sustain, maybe from strike of note beyond. Yeah. You've worked with a lot of incredible artists and producers over the years. Do you have any stories or a couple sessions that were the most interesting or funny or unique?
Well, I mean, if I could, it's hard to pick and choose. One thing that, when you say musicians, I got to do a Rascal Flatts record with Dan Huff producing out here in California. And the cool thing about that is, because Dan was on the road, he didn't go home at night. I could have dinner with him, because we were all staying at a hotel up there. If it had been in Nashville, he would have walked out the door and gone home to his family every night. But so we got to actually have conversations at dinner every night. It was such a pleasure. And working for guitar players, is always a great thing, because they solve your problems for you immediately. I did records for John Shanks for years. When John was doing a record where he didn't write the song, he would hire me to play guitar on it. And working for a guitar player who owns, an insane amount of great gear, I didn't even need to really bring any gear, although I did for those sessions. It's a pleasure, because you're collaborating in this really super intimate way, because they know everything you know, and you know everything they know. It's really amazing. So those were always great sessions. But then, the amazing thing about growing up in New Mexico is, I was, listening to Mad Dogs and Englishmen by Joe Cocker, and loving that record and listening to it over and over and over, and on the LP, and looking at it, like, who are these people? And then, I've done 5 Joe Cocker records, before he passed away. I did 2 decades of Joe Cocker records. That, if you'd have told me when I was a little kid, you're going to be one of the main guys who makes his records, I would have, what are you talking about? But same for Carlos Santana. I've done rhythm guitars on 5 Carlos Santana records, and so those kinds of things you can't, or being in a room with some of these, with Bruce Springsteen or Phil Collins. I remember the Phil Collins session we did, the first one. it was a live tracking day with him playing drums, and you walk in and he's tuning his
Oh, wow.
drums, and there's that sound. It's the only
Yep.
guy that makes that
Yep.
sound. That's that sound. And then
Yep.
you're tracking and
Exactly.
you're looking over and you're going, this is not
Right.
happening. I am not sitting here with him making music. This is not happening. This can't be. Is this a dream?
Yeah.
So yeah, there have been amazing moments like that. Truly amazing moments
that's
like
great.
that.
That's great. You're blessed for that, for sure.
Awesome.
Uh,
Awesome.
Oh, totally.
Rob, do you
Yeah.
have any questions before I ask that final question? Here's the final question.
The final question.
Yeah.
No, we've covered quite a bit. Like I said, I mean, I'm not a guitar player, so but I'm an audio engineer, so I
Yeah.
loved your playing on every, over the years and everything. And I just really encourage people to go and check out your YouTube channel and the master classes and everything, because it just you can get technical, but again, it comes back to the inspiring and making guitar fun or making music fun. And I think that is something that is so important now more than ever, is that we have fun doing what we want to do and doing what we love to do. And that's something that I think you do a great job with, and your personality is awesome.
Yeah.
And it just comes through the camera, you have that presence that really just makes that great. And
you saw my outtakes, you'd realize a lot of the time it doesn't come easy, but sometimes it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I know.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
But yeah, I just think the world of you. So that's.
Is there something else interesting, unexpected about Tim Pierce outside of guitar playing, recording, audio world, that your hobbies, your interest, activities, anything?
Well, I thought about that question, and it's a good one. I'm glad you gave it. You sent me that question in advance, because it's been difficult for me to answer. But there are a couple of things I can share with you that makes me probably different than some musicians. I love music, but I don't love doing it 12 hours a day. Now, I had to do it 10, 12 hours a day during the height of my career, so there were a lot of those days. But it wasn't my choice. I mean, honestly, I like being done when there's still daylight in the sky. And a lot of musicians, they want to go, it's musicians. The thing, I'd love to do a video about this, but I never will, because it would be interpreted wrong. But musicians work twice as hard as regular people, because they have to, in order to, I mean, you're practicing something, you're writing something, you're getting together, your gear for a gig, you're going to the gig early, you're doing the sound check, you're coming home, you're learning a new piece of software, you're trying to beg people to pay you a month after that you've done the gig. I mean, musicians, they work like 12, 14 hours a day. And I never actually wanted to do music every single hour of the day. So I am different than some musicians in that regard, because the people that do it, 16 hours a day, they're great at it. It's amazing. But the other thing is that I'm not really a fan of guitar as much as I am a fan of song.
Yeah.
And I kind of said that at the beginning of this video. So if you're a guitar player, and I'll say that in this interview, and then I'll probably never say it again, because it's you got to be really careful talking like this. But if I see a guitar player and they show me everything they can do in the first 15 minutes, I kind of want to walk out the door and go do something else. I mean, there's a problem out there with guys, showing this escalation of showing you literally everything they can possibly do in 1 minute. And then it's like, okay, I don't actually need to listen to you ever again, because you did it, you showed it, and so it's part of what was great about music in the prior eras, is that you would reveal, I had this musician who told me once, never show him everything. Now, I don't, that's not totally true either, but always hold something back. And if you do always hold something back, then you can hold an audience's interest indefinitely. I mean, I would say,
Exactly.
Derek Trucks is a, perfect example. It's like you're hearing a song, you're enjoying the song, and then you hear this moment and it comes out and you hear another moment and then he goes back into the fabric of the music. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
it's the song and the music and the singer that always is the most compelling thing to me. And I love hearing the guitar emerge and retreat from that and come in and out. And I love hearing bursts of virtuosity. There's a friend we have, Oz Noy, who really is great at that. He
Oh, yeah.
plays, he
Amazing.
loves simple music, and then occasionally he'll unleash this burst, and that's what
Right.
holds your interest, and so
Exactly.
so the surprising thing for me probably that is like I'm more of a fan of music than I am of guitar, and luckily my job was more about guitar orchestration, which really often became about taking a simple part and making it simpler and making it simpler and making it simpler, and then creating another part and making the simplest version of that. And so it kind of is the opposite of what you see on Instagram and out there in the world. In some ways, for musicians to make a living these days, they have to push this highly accelerated, highly virtuoso.
There's that's like a sport
thing.
in a way, isn't it? Kind of like sport, you have to exercise a lot for that. You have to work out a lot to do that. So it is a very different thing than just music and song.
Yeah. So for me, I like being outdoors. I like walking. I like swimming. I like watching, stream really amazing, shows on TV. I like eating.
Like what?
Music is a part of my life, and it's been a big part. My workaholic music tendencies were forced on me for a long time, and now they're kind of in place because I can sit here and putter around every day and get some stuff done. But I love music, but I love music more than I do the guitar. I love songs more than I do the guitar.
That's fantastic. Actually,
Interesting.
I think there's a lot of guitar players maybe that are perceived as guitar gods, if you will, or virtuosos or something that feel the same, and then some that are approaching it from a virtuoso point. But if you listen to a Zeppelin tune or a ZZ Top tune or some of the great guitar players of old that are guitar heroes, quote unquote, it's a lot about the song going on there.
Yeah, that was always my favorite thing, and it still is. And it may be an old-fashioned thing at this point, but I've learned that you actually have to, stay in your lane. And if old-fashioned is my lane part of the time, then I'm gonna
be over in the old-fashioned lane. That's cool.
But you guys are doing great. I love your products, and it's. I look forward to learning more about everything you guys make, and you're helping people a lot with making their environments sound great. So
great, thank you. You can find out more about Tim on his website, timpierce.com, and his YouTube channel, Tim Pierce Guitar, as well as Facebook and Instagram, and his masterclass. Tim, thanks for joining us today on Creative Spaces. We appreciate you talking with us. We had a great conversation. It was great to meet you, and keep watching.
Thank you. Yeah, the honor is all mine. I really appreciate it too.
Thanks again for listening to Creative Spaces. Before we go, please make sure you follow Creative Spaces on YouTube or Twitter. Like, subscribe, leave us a comment, then head over to Orlex.com where you'll find a ton of information about making the right choices when it comes to acoustic treatment and sound isolation for your creative space. You can also purchase Orlex products on our site or visit your favorite Orlex dealer. Thanks for joining us.